Mom abandoned us, leaving me to raise my brother. Now she's dying and needs my kidney. My brother pleads for me to save her. What should I do? She was 13 when her mother disappeared, leaving her to take on a burden that would shape her entire existence. The story of her life was not a fairy tale, but a harrowing journey of resilience, sacrifice, and choices that would eventually lead her to a decision that would tear apart everything she had built within herself. This is a story about a woman forced to raise her little brother alone, a mother seeking redemption, and a family struggling to piece itself back together. Her name was Ava, and her life changed forever on the day her mother left. The door had clicked shut behind her, and Ava knew instinctively that it was final. She tried to cling to the naive hope that her mother might return. But days turned into weeks, and it became clear that she and her 5-year-old brother Ezra were on their own. Their father worked long, grueling hours just to make ends meet, leaving Ava as the only caregiver for her brother. She was still a child, but circumstances forced her to grow up overnight. There were no bedtime stories, no comforting words whispered in her ear. Instead, Ava learned how to split a box of mac and cheese into 2 meals, how to put on a brave face while her world crumbled around her, and how to carry the weight of responsibility that was never meant to be hers. Years passed, and Ava's resentment grew. She was angry at her mother for abandoning them, at her father for not being present, and even at Ezra for needing her so much. But mostly, she was angry at herself for never being able to make things right. She saw other kids living their lives freely, laughing with friends, carefree and happy. Ava envied their normality, while she had no choice but to become a parent to her brother. She gave up her childhood to give Ezra a sense of stability, hiding her tears so he wouldn't worry, pretending everything was fine when in reality, it wasn't. Ezra grew up oblivious to the sacrifices Ava made. He got to go to sports practices, hang out with friends, and led a relatively normal life. By the time Ava turned 18, she had missed out on all the experiences that shaped the people around her. She didn't go to prom, didn't join clubs or date. She was too busy making sure Ezra had a shot at normality. Their relationship became increasingly strained as they grew older. Ezra saw Ava as bossy, controlling, and overbearing, while Ava felt unappreciated and alone in her efforts. 16 years later, the past came knocking on their door. Their mother returned, claiming to have gotten clean and wanting to reconnect. Ezra, who barely remembered the hardest times, eagerly welcomed her back. He longed for the mother he never really got to know and was excited at the prospect of having a family again. But for Ava, her mother's sudden return was anything but a joyous occasion. Ava saw a stranger, not the woman who had abandoned them. It was impossible for her to look at her mother and see anything other than the person who had left her to fend for herself and her brother at a time when she needed her the most. Despite her apprehension, Ava agreed to a family meeting, mostly to appease her father, who was eager to reunite with the woman he had once loved. Ava could see the hope in his eyes, a hope that his family could finally be whole again. But for Ava, it wasn't that simple. She had built walls around herself, and she wasn't ready to let her mother back in. The pain was still too raw, the scars too deep. Their mother tried to mend their broken relationships. She apologized, expressed regret for her actions, and claimed that she wanted to be a part of their lives again. Ezra was quick to forgive, embracing the idea of a new beginning. But Ava couldn't forget. She remembered the nights she had cried herself to sleep, the years of sacrifice, and the burden she had carried alone. She wanted to scream at her mother and demand an explanation for why she had chosen drugs over her children, why she had left without a second thought, and why she thought she deserved a place in their lives now. A few months later, the family received devastating news. Their mother was diagnosed with kidney failure and needed a transplant. The doctors tested both Ava and Ezra, and it turned out that Ava was a perfect match. The pressure to donate began almost immediately. Ezra begged Ava to do it, insisting that it was a chance to heal their family and bring them closer together. Their father, while not directly asking, made it clear that he was hopeful Ava would agree to donate. Even their mother, though she didn't outright ask, seemed to silently plead for Ava's help every time they were in the same room. Ava was torn. On one hand, she knew that donating a kidney could save her mother's life. On the other hand, she couldn't help but feel that it was unfair to ask her to make yet another sacrifice for someone who had already taken so much from her. She had given up her childhood, her sense of security, and her trust in the people who were supposed to protect her. Now, they wanted her to give up a part of herself, literally, for a mother who had chosen to leave her. Ezra couldn't understand Ava's hesitation. He accused her of being unforgiving and selfish, unable to see things from her perspective. The tension between them escalated, and Ava found herself feeling more isolated than ever. Even her husband, who had always been supportive, seemed anxious. He worried about the risks of the surgery and how it might affect their plans to start a family. Ava had worked hard to overcome her past, spending years in therapy to deal with her trauma, and her husband feared that this situation would undo all of the progress she had made. One night, Ava received a call from her aunt. She revealed a secret that Ava had never known. Their mother hadn't just left because of drugs. She had been having an affair with a married man and had gotten pregnant. She left to start a new life, abandoning Ava, Ezra, and their father, blaming her disappearance on her addiction. This revelation opened old wounds for Ava, adding to her feelings of betrayal. Her mother hadn't just chosen drugs over them, she had chosen an entirely different life. Ava realized that she might have a half-sibling somewhere, someone her mother had chosen over her. The weight of this new information, combined with the pressure to donate, became unbearable. Ava found herself questioning everything, every sacrifice she had made, every moment of her childhood she had lost. She stayed up at night, replaying the past in her mind, wondering if she had missed any signs, if there had been anything she could have done differently. The situation came to a head when Ezra showed up at Ava's house while she was at work. He had been texting her non-stop, alternating between begging her to donate and accusing her of being heartless. When Ava didn't respond, he showed up unannounced and got into an argument with her husband. Things escalated quickly, and Ezra ended up trying to physically force his way through the house to find Ava. The police were called, and Ava returned home to find her living room in disarray, her husband with a bruise on his jaw, and her brother gone. Ava was devastated. She had raised Ezra, sacrificed so much for him, and now he was treating her like the enemy. She called him, hoping to talk some sense into him, but the conversation only made things worse. Ezra told her that if their mother died because Ava refused to donate, she would be dead to him, just like their mother had been. Ava hung up the phone, unable to breathe, feeling like her worst fears had come true. The brother she had raised, the one she had given everything for, was choosing their mother over her. In her desperation, Ava decided to confront her father. She told him everything about their mother's affair, the baby, the real reason she had left. For the first time, Ava allowed herself to be vulnerable, to share the burden she had been carrying all these years. Her father broke down, apologizing for not being there for her, for not knowing the truth, for everything she had gone through alone. In that moment, Ava felt both a sense of relief and a deep sadness. She had hurt her father, but she had also finally shared her truth. Ezra's attitude changed after their father spoke to him. He called Ava, apologizing for everything he had said and done. He admitted that he hadn't understood what she had been through, that he had taken her sacrifices for granted. But Ava wasn't sure if she could forgive him. The words he had said, the way he had treated her, it was too much to simply forget. Ava's mother also reached out, begging for forgiveness and asking for a chance to make things right. She acknowledged her mistakes, admitting that she had been young, afraid, and had made terrible choices. But Ava couldn't help but think, where was that empathy when she was a scared teenager, left alone to care for her brother? After much soul-searching, Ava made a decision that shocked everyone, including herself. She decided to donate her kidney. It wasn't because she forgave her mother or because she wanted to heal their family. It was because Ava realized that her anger and resentment were consuming her. She didn't want to carry that weight anymore. She didn't want to let her mother's mistakes define her life. She wanted to be free of the past, to move forward without the burden of bitterness. The surgery was difficult, both physically and emotionally. Ava had moments where she questioned her decision, where the pain felt too much to bear. But as she lay in the hospital bed, recovering, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She had made her choice, and it was her own. She wasn't doing it for her mother, for Ezra, or for her father. She was doing it for herself, to let go of the anger that had held her captive for so long. The months following the surgery were a time of healing, not just for Ava, but for her entire family. Her relationship with Ezra slowly began to mend. He finally started to understand the sacrifices Ava had made for him. And he expressed genuine remorse for how he had treated her. It wasn't an immediate fix, there were still moments of tension. Still painful memories to work through, but it was a start. Ava's mother, too, was trying to change. She stayed sober, continued with therapy, and made an effort to be present in their lives. For Ava, it wasn't about forgiving and forgetting. It was about setting boundaries. About deciding how much of her mother she wanted in her life. They weren't suddenly a happy family. But they were trying, and that was enough for Ava. Ava learned that forgiveness isn't always about the other person. It's about freeing yourself from the pain, the anger, and the resentment that keeps you tied to the past. She learned that it's okay to put yourself first, to prioritize your own health and happiness, even when others call you selfish for it. Ava had spent her entire life sacrificing for her family. And for once, she wanted to live for herself. This experience taught Ava that family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who are there for you, who support you, who love you unconditionally. Her husband had stood by her through everything, even when her family turned against her. He was her rock, her safe place, and for that, Ava was endlessly grateful. Ava's journey wasn't over. She still had a long way to go in her healing process. But she was finally on the right path. She was learning to let go of the past, to forgive herself for the mistakes she had made, and to embrace the life she had fought so hard to build. She knew there would be dark days ahead, moments of doubt and pain, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. The sacrifice Ava made wasn't just about giving her mother a second chance at life. It was about giving herself a second chance, a chance to let go, to heal, and to move forward, and in the end, that was the greatest gift she could have given herself. Ava's story is one of resilience, of making impossible choices, and of finding her own path to healing. It's a reminder that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead to the most growth. And that even in the midst of pain, there is hope for a better future. My fiancée changed right after I proposed. And now her friends call me toxic. I hate her for wanting to end the engagement? It all began on a seemingly perfect day. The sun was shining. Birds were singing, and a proposal that had been anticipated for months finally happened. But little did the protagonist know that this joyful moment would mark the beginning of a tumultuous journey. One filled with betrayal, self-discovery, and the difficult but necessary decision to let go. Today, we'll dive into a story where love took a shocking turn. The truth was unveiled, and people were left to pick up the pieces. A tale that will captivate you, showing just how quickly one's life can unravel once the truth comes to light. Our protagonist, Andrew, had been with his girlfriend Sharon for 2 blissful years. From the outside, everything appeared to be picture perfect. They had shared values, common dreams, and enough chemistry to light up any room. Sharon, with her charming smile and warmth, seemed to be the ideal life partner. So, when Andrew proposed to her after a thoughtful, romantic dinner, he expected the rest of their lives to unfold beautifully. But things began to change almost immediately after the proposal. Andrew had imagined that they would be floating on clouds of happiness. But instead, Sharon's demeanor shifted. She began hanging out with a new group of friends, 6 women who had seemingly come out of nowhere. Andrew found this sudden circle odd since, in 2 years of dating, Sharon had never mentioned these friends. It was strange, he thought, that Sharon had never introduced him to them before. He couldn't shake off the feeling that they were a bad influence on her. And what was even more baffling was how dismissive Sharon became about the concerns he expressed. One night, Andrew returned home from work to find the 6 women in his living room. Having helped themselves to the wine rack, they were carefree, boisterous, and completely comfortable. They emptied bottles without asking, treated Andrew's home as their own, and Sharon joined in without a second thought. When Andrew finally expressed discomfort, Sharon brushed him off, calling him, no fun. Andrew, however, didn't think that setting healthy boundaries meant that he was being boring. Soon, Sharon started inviting her friends over on weeknights without informing Andrew. They acted like they owned the place, demanding that he refilled their wine glasses, treating him as a servant in his own home. It was an uncomfortable shift for Andrew, who had always thought of Sharon as someone who respected him and his space. Now, Sharon seemed different, almost as if she had been waiting for a proposal to drop her act. One evening, Sharon suggested a group dinner at a fancy restaurant to mend things between Andrew and her friends. Though reluctant, Andrew agreed, hoping to salvage the situation. What followed was a nightmare. Throughout the dinner, Sharon's friends bombarded Andrew with personal questions, probing into his finances, his career, and his house, while refusing to answer any questions about themselves. They also pushed the boundaries of acceptable conversation, debating topics like polyamory and the idea of staying friends with exes. Andrew was shocked when Sharon, who had once clearly expressed her strong opposition to such ideas, suddenly spoke favorably about them. And then came the ultimate indignity, the bill. Sharon slid the check over to Andrew, expecting him to cover it for everyone. When he refused and paid only for his part, a heated argument ensued. Sharon accused him of being petty and fragile, while Andrew was left wondering what had happened to the woman he had loved. The tension between them grew more intense after that evening. Sharon's new friends, who Andrew now regarded as toxic, continued to exert their influence on her. Things hit a breaking point when Sharon, without permission, took Andrew's prized golf clubs to lend to one of her friend's boyfriends. These clubs had been a cherished gift from his late father, and seeing them treated so carelessly broke Andrew's heart. When he confronted Sharon, she attempted to gaslight him, claiming he had given his permission. It was in that moment that Andrew realized just how deeply Sharon's behavior had changed, and not for the better. This wasn't about the golf clubs or the wine anymore. It was about respect, values, and honesty. Andrew felt a wave of realization wash over him. If Sharon was capable of disregarding him so easily, then perhaps she wasn't the person he had imagined. He asked her to return his ring, wanting time to reconsider their engagement. Sharon begged and cried, insisting that she was merely stressed from work, that it was all a misunderstanding. But Andrew could no longer believe her. Over the following days, Sharon's friends bombarded Andrew with text messages, calling him insecure, toxic, and controlling. They insisted that he wasn't man enough for Sharon. It hurt Andrew, not because he believed them, but because he realized that Sharon was allowing them to treat him like this. His feelings no longer mattered to her, and he finally decided that it was time to walk away. Now, let's take a step back and explore why this story resonates with so many. It isn't just about a sudden change in behavior or manipulative friends. It's about the facade that some people put up in relationships. Sharon had hidden aspects of herself, creating an illusion that Andrew fell in love with. She wanted the ring, the security, but not the partnership that marriage entailed. This kind of behavior isn't uncommon. Many people hide parts of themselves early in relationships, presenting only the best sides. But as time goes on, their true selves emerge, and for some, this means that their partner is blindsided. Sharon had waited until Andrew proposed, thinking she had secured his commitment, before revealing her true colors that were toxic and manipulative. Andrew's story reminds us of the importance of consistent behavior and shared values in relationships. When Sharon's friends entered the picture, her values shifted. She no longer seemed to care about the boundaries that mattered to Andrew. She disregarded his possessions, his feelings, and his sense of home. Andrew came to understand that love isn't about forcing someone to fit into a life that suits your needs, but rather about building a life together that respects both partners. This story could have gone a different way if Sharon had communicated her changing beliefs or if she had treated Andrew with the respect he deserved. But she didn't. Instead, she allowed her friends to ridicule him, disregarded his boundaries, and tried to manipulate him into compliance. In doing so, she shattered the foundation of their relationship, trust. To illustrate further, let's consider another scenario. Imagine a couple where one partner slowly begins to isolate the other from their friends. At first, they do it subtly, saying they don't feel comfortable with a particular friend. Over time, they create friction with each friend until the isolated partner is left without a support system. This is a classic case of emotional control and manipulation, similar to how Sharon allowed her friends to undermine Andrew's confidence and treat him poorly. It can be difficult to spot when someone is being manipulative, especially when emotions are involved. However, it's crucial to recognize when behavior shifts from loving to controlling. Andrew finally realized that he could no longer trust Sharon, and that realization brought clarity. The love he had once felt for her was based on a version of Sharon that no longer existed. He could either continue to hold onto that illusion, hoping that the person he loved would come back, or he could face the harsh reality and walk away. He chose the latter, a painful but necessary decision for his own well-being. Another powerful story that mirrors this is the one of Mary and Jessica. Mary, who was ostracized by her family for standing up against her father, experienced betrayal on a different level, familial betrayal. Jessica, her sister, not only ignored the abuse Mary suffered but actively worked to discredit her, telling others that Mary was mentally unstable. This, too, is a form of manipulation and abuse. Mary was left alone, with her entire family turning against her to protect a predator. But despite the pain, Mary chose to continue speaking her truth. Mary's story shows us that, sometimes, even those closest to us can betray us in unimaginable ways. But it also shows us resilience. Mary never stopped fighting for herself, even when her own sister chose to take the side of her abuser. And when Andrew reached out to Mary, a new chapter began. They formed a friendship, and Mary even found love again, this time with someone who appreciated her for who she was. It's a reminder that even after immense betrayal, it's possible to rebuild and find happiness. In both stories, there's a pivotal lesson: trust is fragile, and once broken, it's incredibly difficult to repair. Whether it's a romantic partner who turns into someone unrecognizable or a family member who chooses to protect an abuser over an innocent victim, betrayal leaves scars. But there's also hope. Both Andrew and Mary chose to walk away from toxic relationships, and in doing so, they opened the door to healthier, more authentic connections. For those of you watching, consider these stories as reminders. Love isn't about control, manipulation, or hiding who you truly are. It's about respect, honesty, and the willingness to work through challenges together. If someone begins to change their behavior suddenly, if they start to disregard your feelings or dismiss your concerns, take a step back and evaluate what's happening. Is this truly the person you want to spend your life with? Are they respecting your boundaries and values? Or are they trying to force you into their version of a relationship? Andrew and Mary found themselves in situations where their love and trust were abused. But they didn't let that define their futures. They chose to move forward, leaving behind those who didn't deserve them. And in doing so, they found a new path, one filled with authenticity and hope. So, whether you're in a relationship, thinking about marriage, or even dealing with difficult family dynamics, remember the importance of staying true to yourself. Don't let anyone make you feel small or insignificant. Don't allow anyone to convince you that your boundaries don't matter. True love respects, true love honors, and true love lifts you up rather than tears you down. Andrew and Mary's stories remind us that sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is walk away. And while it might be painful, it's often the only way to find the love and respect we truly deserve.